Hi guys, so today we're going to do some UV mapping. There's quite a lot to this tutorial, so I'm going to divide it into two parts. Firstly the UV mapping part, and secondly the Photoshop part. So the first thing we want to do is create UVs for this book I briefly modeled, so that we can then use an image editing program to texture it accurately. Okay, so at the moment, as you can see, that would be a cover face, that would be a paper face, that's the spine area, and these are what I'd call the edges of the book, and the inside edges. So we're going to start by texturing or mapping the front, rear and spine first. So just make sure your history is deleted on this. And as we UV map, we'll be creating a lot of history, so we've got to remember to regularly delete it. So open Book SC, Book Scene, and you'll get an object in there called Book Geo. So with the object selected, go to Window, UV Texture Editor. And this is the window where we'll be doing all our actual UVing. So the first thing we want to do is UV the front of the book. So let's just select the faces of the front, and you'll see them selected inside the UV editor. Now we want to make a projection that just projects those faces. So we're going to go to our Create UVs Planar Mapping tool. We're going to click the settings box, and these are the settings here. Now we want to hit those faces directly, dead on. So if you look at the little widget in the bottom left, you'll see that dead on is the x-axis. So you need to change the project from to x-axis, and make sure keep image width and height ratio is checked. That'll ensure that the UVs that are generated, the size is in relation to the actual object. So as long as only those faces are selected, click project. And now in the UV editor, we've got our new projection. So I'm just going to drag it out of the way so it's easy to select later and not overlapping anything. So in the viewport, just click off the projection, and now we'll do the rear. So again, selecting faces, and we're actually projecting from the same axis, so I'm just going to click project and drag it away. Now I'm going to do the spine. I'm going to get the whole spine here. This time we're coming in from the Z-axis. So create UVs, planar mapping settings, Z-axis, project, and drag it away again. So I'm just going to click off. So now we're going to do some editing of these UVs. So what we want to do is, right now we have 3 projections, which equals 3 UV shells. If I right mouse select UV and click on one UV coordinate and go select shell, it'll automatically select the entire shell, and I can then move it around in Maya just like any object in a viewport. So I'm just going to go through and grab this shell here and move it over here, and then this middle shell, which is the spine. And we want to sew this back together into one piece. So right now I can tell that if I click this one edge here, it's showing up on the spine as well. That's because it's the same edge. So I already know I need to flip this side here, flip its axes over. So I'm going to right click UV and select all its UVs, and at the top here use the flip button. And now, with a little bit of luck, my edges line up. So I need to do the same thing with this one here. So I'm just going to get a little bit closer and moving it in. And I'll grab that one a little bit closer too. And I'm just going to select those 2 edges. So I'll just select the first one and shift select the next one. I'm going to go polygons, sew UV edges. I'm going to repeat the process here as well. Sew UV edges. Sorry, that one didn't work. There it goes. So now I've got one shell for the entire book cover. Just going to drag it out of the way. And if you have problems with your software, UV editing has a tendency to crash mire in the worst of situations. So just make sure you're saving your scene regularly. Let's call this one Book 2. So now that we've done the jacket, I want to do the actual paper area of the book. So I'm going to do the top and the bottom together at the same time. I'm going to go create UVs planar, and I'm projecting up and down, so that's the y-axis. I'm going to drag this out of the way. So that's actually one projection with two shells, top and bottom. So I'm going to click on one UV, go select shell. I'm going to move that out of the way. And I'm going to use this rotate tool to rotate that way. And this one I'm going to rotate in the other direction. And now I'm going to go back and project this side of the spine, which is from the z-axis. So I'm going to go planar mapping. I want Z, project, and drag it over here and drop out of the tool. So now I'm going to sew that one back together as well. Just going to rotate that, hit my move tool, and I'm going to check that everything's in the right way around. And actually it's not, so I've selected that edge and this edge over here is popping up. So let's just select that middle one and flip across the axis. Just scale it up a bit and move it into a good place for sewing it together. So I'm going to select all those edges there and Control to deselect the edges I don't want. I'm going to sew. Same thing again. Oh, so at the moment, if I select that top edge, the bottom one's being selected. That means that this last shell is on the wrong vertical axis. So I'm going to flip it on the vertical and then sew it together. So now I've got my my book's paper UV'd and mapped. I'm just going to drag it under here and use the scale tool to kind of make the scale of the different shells relative to each other. I'm going to move that in. So what have I got left to project? I've got the top of the book. So just grab this edge here and double click to get the whole edge loop. And that way. Okay, so I'm going to deselect the middle of the book, and all I want selected at this point is the top and the bottom. Yep. And I'm going to do another planar map from the y-axis and project and move it out of the way. I'm going to put that down here to line up with the rest. So what have we got left? We've got now the front of the book. So that's the front edges. So with only those selected, I'm going to make a planar map from the z-axis. I'm going to rotate my projection over there. And now I'm going to drag it down into place. And now that I've got all of those separate projections, if I want to select the faces that haven't been done, I might as well do it from the UV texture editor. So there are the faces there, and that's the inside edge of the whole book. I'm going to use a trick here and go, sorry, there's a frog in my throat. I'm going to use a trick here and use an automatic map. Because it's the inside edge and will very rarely be seen at high res on camera, I'm just going to go create UVs, automatic mapping. And these are the UVs for the outside edge. Now the trick is you want to place your UVs to take maximum advantage of your texture space. So I'm going to do, because the shape of this UV is a big U shape, I'm going to scale this that way and then that way to make them as big as possible within my UV texture space. And I might as well do the other one. keep rotating and scale that way and that way. Put that there. And I want to get this last shell. Let's just move them in there. So now I've got my UVs for my objects laid out really nice, really cleanly. I can probably make these two shells move up into the UV space a little better. So I'm going to select those shells. I'm going to move them up as tight as they go, and then I'm going to just do that last shell as well, and same deal, moving up. Just trying to maximize the space utilized. So now I've got my book totally UV'd. I need to then drop it back from the work area into one-to-one space. Now what that means is these other three quadrants of this grid are negative space. So if I was to flip my UVs and put them over there, I'd still get the image lined up exactly the same way on the object, but in negative. So my text would be backwards. It's handy so that you can UV just one side of an object and then lay your UVs out dead center, and you're effectively taking more advantage of texture space. For this, we'll just stick to the one-to-one texture space. And there we go, there you have it. So that's a fully UV'd book. Now, if I go into my channel box, I've got a lot of history because UVing is part of my construction history. So I'm just going to go Edit, Delete all by type, History, and then save my scene with Control S. So finally, we're going to move from here. We're going to use that UV grid that we laid out, those UV coordinates we laid out for our book. We can actually import them into Photoshop and use that as a guideline for texturing the book. We'll output the image now, and in the next tutorial, we'll spend pretty much all the time in Photoshop actually editing the images using the UVs as a base. So select your object, go in your UV texture editor, go Polygons, UV snapshot, and you'll get the snapshot window. And this is going to save the UV map into your images folder of your project folder. So let's just go 1024 by 1024 square. Make sure your image format is a TIFF image. Make your color value white and leave that anti-alias lines checked. As long as your book's selected, hit OK. I'm just going to overwrite the old file. And now I have an image in my folder. I'll just pull it up so you can see it. So I've just opened that UV image in Photoshop, and this is now my guide to how I'm going to actually texture the book. Well, just before we leave, we'll just check that our UVs are in the right direction. So if this is the front of the book, then we want this face and this face to be the right-hand side of the book in the UV texture editor. So let's just open our UV texture editor. And already I can tell that the jacket is in the wrong place. So I'm just going to select my whole book. I'm going to select this shell here, this middle shell of the cover. Go select shell. I'm just going to flip it across the horizontal and just check it now. So now when I texture, I know that my front cover is over to the right and it's moving from left to right so that my text will line up correctly. I'll see you in tutorial part B.